What makes Nico Rosberg, one of Hamilton's most vocal critics, suddenly choose to remain silent just as his former teammate delivers one of his best hits in years? Could it be that numbers have finally spoken louder than words? The start of the United States Grand Prix was not just another procedure in a race on the calendar. It was a tactical and emotional demonstration that redefined the figure of Lewis Hamilton in his complicated period with Ferrari. From fifth position, he was facing not only the cars in front of him, but also the accumulated pressure of a season that, up to that point, had offered more frustration than hope. And yet, in the first seconds of the competition, the British driver executed one of the most intelligent and decisive maneuvers of the year. He took advantage of the natural chaos of Turn 1 of the Circuit of the Americas to climb positions, reading with surgical precision the traffic jam that trapped his direct rivals. While George Russell and Oscar Piastri closed in trying to defend each other, Hamilton drew a wider outside line, trusting in traction and his ability to react. That line, normally risky due to the possibility of losing grip or being pushed out, became his best ally. He exited the corner ahead of both of them, gaining 2 positions before completing half a sector of the race. It was a play that showed not only his experience, but also that, despite being 40 years old and having a complicated adaptation period, his reflexes, his strategic aggressiveness and his pure racing instinct were still as valid as ever. The race was not easy. Over more than 50 laps, Hamilton maintained a race pace that surprised even his own engineers. There were no obvious shocks, no costly blockages or miscalculations. His driving was precise, clean and consistent, something that Ferrari had failed to establish as a characteristic in 2025. For much of the competition, he kept Oscar Piastri at bay, managing the distance with a mix of solid performance and intelligent tire management, without wearing out the car more than necessary. However, everything was about to collapse in the last lap. When it seemed that his 4th place was assured, Hamilton reported a strange sensation in the car. A sudden loss of speed between turns 4 and 5, accompanied by understeer so severe that he thought he had punctured a tire. In a matter of seconds, Piastri's lead plummeted from more than 5 seconds to less than 2. Subsequent telemetry revealed a drop in power delivery from the hybrid system, particularly the ERS system, causing that feeling of momentary loss of control. Despite the situation, Hamilton did not break down. He adjusted his line, adapted to the new feel of the car and executed the last corners of the circuit as if his car were in perfect condition. He crossed the finish line with a lead of just 1.2 seconds over Piastri. For any other pilot, it would have been a harrowing escape. For Hamilton, it was a statement of principle. He can still sustain the pressure, he can still save key points, he can still make the difference. For much of the last few years, Nico Rosberg has established himself as one of the most critical, incisive and analytical voices in the paddock. His rise from world champion in 2016 to media figure positioned him as someone who not only knows the pressures of the highest level of competition, but is not afraid to point out, question and, at times, make people uncomfortable. From his platform on Sky Sports F1, Rosberg has built a narrative that feeds on contrast. The fall of the Lewis Hamilton he once knew, the man who for 3 years was his direct rival at Mercedes, the teammate with whom he shared one of the most toxic and intense environments that the German team has had in its recent history. That common history gives him the authority to speak, but it also exposes his every word to deeper analysis. And in 2025, Rosberg did not stop taking advantage of that position. In races like Spain, he was brutally honest. He described Hamilton's performance as shockingly bad, alluding to a total disconnect between driver and car. Months later, in other broadcasts, he went further, stating that the SF-25 was unmanageable, thus supporting the British's constant complaints about the lack of balance. For Rosberg, Hamilton seemed to be facing not only a capricious car, but also an inescapable biological reality, the passage of time. When you reach 40 years old, your performance is going to decline, even if you are the best of all time, he stated, without nuance, during an intervention on Sky Germany. Rosberg's silence also highlights the discomfort that can come with seeing a rival from the past defy the expectations that one has helped shape. Because if Hamilton resurfaces, if he shows that he can still compete with the best in adverse conditions, then not only does the technical analysis crumble, the ego is also destabilized. And although Rosberg has publicly shown himself to be an objective commentator, the shared history between the two does not disappear. It is there in every sentence that is said or omitted. Another crucial point is the media moment. Rosberg understands better than anyone the power of narrative in Formula One. He knows when to speak, when to remain silent, and how that affects public perception. Therefore, the fact that he chooses not to voice an opinion on one of Hamilton's strongest weekends all year suggests something deeper. There is no criticism that can be sustained without falling into contradiction, because there is nothing to blame when the data, lap times, maneuvers, and emotional management are at a competitive level. Rosberg himself has pointed out in the past that you cannot analyze Formula One from statistics alone, but in Austin, even that worked against him. But the problems began on the track. From the first preseason sessions in Bahrain, the SF-25 showed itself as a car with an extremely narrow operating window. This means that its maximum performance can only be achieved under very specific conditions of temperature, aerodynamic configuration, and circuit type. It is, in practical terms, a capricious car. On technical circuits with intermediate temperatures like Austin, this type of design can offer glimpses of competitiveness, but in more extreme scenarios, whether urban like Monaco or abrasive like Suzuka, its weaknesses are exposed with brutal clarity. One of the biggest criticisms that the car has received is its instability in medium and high corners. The reports from both drivers, Hamilton and Leclerc, coincide in describing erratic behavior. Excessive understeer when entering the curve and sudden oversteer when exiting it. This not only makes steering difficult, but also prevents the pilot from pushing the limit with confidence. Hamilton has described the experience as a constant fight with the steering wheel, and Leclerc has gone so far as to describe it as unpredictable. When a driver cannot anticipate the car's response to his inputs, the scope for finding performance disappears. And yet, Hamilton is starting to get the hang of it. That is the great paradox. As the car disappoints, the driver begins to emerge. He has adjusted his driving style, invested hours in the simulator to understand how to live with the car's defects instead of trying to eliminate them, and has accepted the challenge with a resilience that few expected at this point in his career. His transition to the SF-25 has not been immediate, but he is beginning to establish himself as one of the few who have managed to find performance in an unfavorable technical environment. On the other hand, the war of opinions around the car has been constant. Analysts like Rosberg have pointed it out as one of the worst Ferraris of the last 5 years in terms of dynamic balance. Others, more cautious, have stressed that the problem is not so much the base of the car, but rather the lack of continuity in development, the disconnection between aerodynamic theory and practical application. In any case, the consensus is clear. The SF-25 is a complex, frustrating car full of contradictions. He has speed under optimal conditions, but those conditions rarely occur. This is the true background of the Austin GP. It wasn't just a good race from Hamilton. It was a demonstration of how a driver can find performance where his car does not facilitate it, how adaptation surpasses design, and how, sometimes, the human factor continues to be the most powerful variable in the Formula One equation. In a year where Ferrari has failed from the factory, Hamilton begins to recover from the cockpit. And that difference, although small, could end up being decisive. Lewis Hamilton's fourth-place finish at the United States Grand Prix did not radically alter the championship table, cause an immediate turn in Ferrari's fortunes, or change the dominant narrative of the season in any drastic way. However, what happened in Austin has a symbolic and sporting value that transcends any immediate figure or statistics. Because it was not a simple result, it was a vindication. A quiet but powerful demonstration that Hamilton, even in the midst of one of his most difficult seasons, remains an elite competitor, capable of confronting not only his rivals, but also his team's own technical limitations. In the context of a technically disoriented Ferrari, with no tangible evolution in the SF-25 and with its focus already shifted towards the 2026 development, Hamilton's performance in Austin was a positive anomaly. He didn't have the best car, he didn't start from the front rows, and he also had to deal with an unexpected failure in the hybrid system during the last lap. Despite all that, he maintained control, saved the position and closed out one of the strongest weekends of the year. That performance, by itself, breaks the discourse of decadence that has accompanied him since his departure from Mercedes. From a technical standpoint, Hamilton's performance in Austin also suggests that he has crossed a key line in his adaptation process to the SF-25. A car that requires fine adjustments, tolerance to understeer, and aggressive but controlled driving in medium-speed corners. Hamilton, known for his sensitivity behind the wheel and his precision with the brakes, has modified his style to get closer to that of Leclerc, even adopting braking and corner entry strategies more similar to those that the Monegasque has developed in response to the car's erratic behavior. That speaks of maturity, openness to change, and an unwavering will to improve in adverse conditions. And furthermore, do you trust that Hamilton will be able to maintain this level of performance for the remainder of the championship, especially on more demanding tracks for the SF-25? Because although Austin favored certain characteristics of the car and allowed good tire management, there are circuits that will brutally expose the structural limitations of the car. Can Hamilton continue to adapt, or was this his last great performance of the year? Leave it in the comments what you think about all this.